The story of how big oil came to dominate the world is filled with ambition, strategic maneuvering, and an enormous amount of power over the politics, economy, and society of the entire planet. The development of the oil business has had a significant impact on the modern world in a variety of ways, including the fueling of economies and the starting of wars. The following is an in-depth examination of the primary actions that big oil took to achieve such unparalleled levels of control. Rockefeller's Standard Oil monopoly, which is considered to be the birthplace of the oil industry. John D. Rockefeller and the establishment of Standard Oil in the latter half of the 19th century created the groundwork for dominating the big oil industry. Throughout his career, Rockefeller was able to buy a large number of smaller oil companies by employing aggressive commercial strategies. These strategies included the use of hidden railroad rebates and rigorous competition. By the 1880s, Standard Oil had established a monopoly on the oil market in the United States, controlling more than 90% of the market. Rockefeller's business concept was straightforward yet revolutionary. He sought to achieve vertical integration, which meant he would control all components of the oil supply chain, from production to transportation to refining to distribution. Through this dominance, Standard Oil was able to set prices and undercut competitors, which ultimately resulted in many of them going out of business. A collaboration and influence on the part of the government. To preserve and broaden their sphere of influence, oil companies established fruitful connections with many governments. This mutually beneficial connection ensured that policies favorable to big oil were put into effect, frequently at the expense of developing alternative energy sources or environmental concerns. In one of the earliest examples of this, Standard Oil engaged in lobbying efforts to shape regulatory frameworks that were favorable to the company's interests. The oil sector could fund political campaigns, lobbyists, and think tanks over time because of its enormous pockets. This allowed the industry to guarantee that its agenda was always represented in the halls of power. The control of the world's oil reserves. It became increasingly important to provide a consistent supply of oil as the demand for it increased. One of the ways that big oil expanded its global reach was by purchasing the rights to some of the most lucrative oil fields in the world. As a result of the establishment of multinational oil corporations, such as Royal Dutch Shell and British Petroleum, the oil industry has become increasingly globalized. To get oil concessions, these corporations frequently engaged in negotiations with governments of other countries, sometimes employing deceptive strategies or working in conjunction with colonial powers. The implementation of this strategy resulted in the establishment of extensive oil infrastructures in the Middle East, South America, and Africa, all of which would go on to become essential to the supply of oil on a worldwide scale. The establishment of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries and the control of prices. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries was established in 1960 by the main oil-producing nations to counterbalance the dominance of big oil and to gain control of the pricing of oil. Nevertheless, large oil firms adapted by working together with OPEC nations, which ensured a constant supply while maintaining global oil prices within lucrative margins. This prevented the companies from losing control of the situation. Through the formation of this alliance, oil companies were able to keep their dominant position in the global energy markets. Through their ability to exert influence over production quotas and pricing, both OPEC and big oil were able to exert their authority over the economic and political stability of a great number of countries all over the world, influencing energy policy and the public's perception of climate change. Early on, big oil recognized the potential it possessed to influence both public opinion and the policies of the government. By making substantial efforts in advertising and public relations, as well as by sponsoring scientific research, oil firms attempted to portray themselves as necessary to the development of modern society and society as a whole. Additionally, the sector made significant investments in lobbying against environmental legislation and in encouraging skepticism regarding climate change. Big oil was able to disrupt the status quo of the scientific community and postpone the use of renewable energy technology because it provided financial support to academic institutes and think tanks. The diversification and management of alternative energy sources. In response to growing worries regarding the environmental impact of fossil fuels, big oil strategically diversified its investment portfolio to ensure that they would continue to be important players in any future energy market. Major oil firms started investing in alternative energy sources such as natural gas and renewables. To achieve this diversity, it was not enough to just accept new energy technologies. It was also necessary to exercise control over them. Oil companies can exert control over the rate and course of the transition away from fossil fuels by investing in renewable energy sources. This would ensure that any shift would take place according to their terms. Influence on various geopolitical conflicts and international conflicts. The strategic significance of oil has resulted in it becoming a focal point of wars all over the world. The interests of big oil have frequently been connected with national objectives. particularly in the United States, which has resulted in military interventions and wars in places that are prolific in oil resources. The availability of oil reserves has been a crucial element in several conflicts, ranging from the Gulf Wars to the intervention in Libya. There have been instances in which oil firms have been accused of adding fuel to the fire or even starting disputes to keep their control over resources. In particular, the history of the Middle East is intricately intertwined with the interests of big oil, whose influence has impacted the region's politics and economics. This is especially true in the case of the Middle East. Technology advancements and the expansion of existing infrastructure. To improve the efficiency of the oil extraction and refining operations, big oil made significant investments in technological improvements. Oil corporations have been able to reach deposits that were previously unexplored and boost their output as a result of innovations such as deep-sea drilling, hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, and sophisticated refining procedures. In addition, the establishment of a vast infrastructure architecture, which includes pipelines, refineries, and distribution networks, has solidified the position of oil as a primary source of energy for the entire world. High barriers to entry are created for potential competitors as a result of the high costs associated with developing and maintaining this infrastructure. The integration of the global economy and dependence on countries. Because oil has become the lifeblood of modern economies, the supply and price of oil are extremely important to the stability of the economy. The globe has become extremely reliant on a consistent supply of oil as a result of the widespread incorporation of oil into every facet of industrial society, including transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, and heating. Through the acquisition of long-term contracts, the practice of price fixing, and the exertion of influence over global energy markets, big oil has been able to capitalize on this dependency. Through their efforts to ensure that economies continue to be dependent on oil, these corporations have managed to preserve their power and influence. The 10th point is the consolidation of corporations and mega-mergers. Throughout the later half of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, there was a surge of mergers and acquisitions that further entrenched the power of the big oil industry. Megacorporations with enormous resources and a great deal of influence were developed as a result of mergers such as those between Exxon and Mobil, Chevron and Texaco, and BP and Amoco. When these businesses were consolidated, they possessed the financial resources necessary to make investments in developing technology, grow into emerging markets, and weather economic downturns. As a result of the concentration of power in a small number of megacorporations, competition was diminished, which enabled big oil to continue to maintain its dominant position. Conclusion: the legacy of big oil and its prospects for the future. The conquest of the world by big oil is a convoluted story that involves strategic thinking, ruthless economic methods, and a substantial impact on the politics and society of the entire planet. The sector has played a significant role in shaping the modern world since it has been a primary driver of economic expansion while also contributing to environmental problems and geopolitical conflicts. Big oil is confronted with several challenges and opportunities at the same time that the globe is struggling with climate change and the requirement for sustainable energy alternatives. To make the transition to a low-carbon economy, there will need to be a significant change in both the production and use of energy. How big oil adjusts to this new reality will decide the next role that it plays in the economy of the entire world. Enjoy the content. Make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Your support helps us bring you more awesome content. Let us know your thoughts and what you'd like to see next.